The black rain poured heavily against the stained glass of the capital's old church, where the funeral of the renowned billionaire businessman Robert was taking place. Inside, a suffocating silence prevailed, broken only by the faint weeping of the remaining family members and the relative clad in black, their greedy eyes staring toward the coffin, not out of grief, but in anticipation of the moment. The massive inheritance would be divided. In the middle stood Selina, Robert's only daughter. She wore a simple black dress. Her face was pale as a pearl, reflecting the sheer depth of her shock and sadness. She was not weeping aloud, but rather staring at her father's body in a frozen stall. Her father had not died of natural causes as the sudden medical report claimed. Instead, he had been stabbed in the back while everyone was caught off guard. Yet the greater shock that paralyzed her limbs was not the sudden demise, but rather the person standing just a few paces away, casting a chilling, intimidating shadow over the entire hall. It was her cousin, Jeon Jungkook, a young businessman and the CEO of the country's largest investment and the security conglomerate. He wore a sharp-cut black formal suit and a heavy overcoat that accentuated his massive build and broad shoulders. His sharp features looked as if they had been carved from steel rock. Jet black eyes with a deadly unblinking coldness, and neatly styled black hair exuding an authoritative dignity that made even the most powerful businessman step back 2 paces in his presence. To the press and the media, Jungkook was the iron genius, steering the financial market. But behind the closed doors, Selena knew the dark truth whispered by everyone in the shadows. Jungkook was the direct leader of the black network controlling the underworld, the hidden mafia boss that whom that state highest corrupt figures submitted, and the ruthless hand that showed no mercy to anyone who stood in its way. Selena glared at him with burning eyes, with hatred and suspicion. She believed with absolute certainty that Jungkook, through his dark influence and desire for expansion, was the one behind her father's sudden death to seize his financial empire. After the funeral service concluded, the family members and the lawyers gathered in the dim office room of Robert's grand mansion. The large wooden table was surrounded by the greedy faces of uncles and relatives, all eagerly awaiting the official announcement of the estate's distribution. The deceased's personal lawyer stood up and, with trembling hands, broke open a document sealed with secret red wax. Clearing his throat, he spoke in a tense voice that echoed through the room. Selena shouted in a sharp feminine voice, ablaze with anger. He rose very slowly, casting a terrifying aura over the room that forced the ankles into silent retreat. He walked towards Selena with heavy, measured steps, like a panther, until he stopped directly in front of her. Difference in height and build between them was terrifying. She appeared so soft and delicate before him, like a butterfly hovering around a destructive flame. He leaned down slightly with his broad shoulders to meet her eye level, bringing with him the scent of expensive leather and tobacco laced with coldness. He spoke in a deep masculine voice, sharp as a knife, with a calm tone that carried enough cruelty to shatter mountains. Selena clenched her fists in anger and raised her head defiantly, despite her inner panic. As if telling her that from this very moment she had become his sole possession. He slowly released her wrist, then turned toward his hulking bodyguards, dressed in black suits, standing by the door. In a dry tone and unquestionable command, he said, Selena looked at him with eyes brimming with tears of helplessness and hatred as she watched him leave the hall. In his imposing black overcoat without looking back, she realized that she had not merely fallen under the guardianship of her ruthless cousin, but that the doors of a possessive hell had slammed shut open her rule by a mafia boss wearing the mask of an honorable businessman. The journey toward the North Mansion was nothing more than the swift onset of a suffocation that awaited Selena within her cousin's domain. reaching the lower office wing to search for any document, record, or proof tied to her father's will, or anything proving John Cook's involvement in the crime and forgery. She slunk through the stone paved corridor, descending into the lower floor, where dim light leaked from beneath the massive wooden door, crafted from reinforced teak. She pressed her ear against the cold wood, catching faint yet deadly serious voices from within. Peering through the narrow seam of the door, her eyes met the sharp, piercing gaze of her cousin aside, who then turned, giving his back to the door. Selena's blood rushed to her head, her eyes widening in sheer panic. She had just heard the names of mafia syndicates, resource deals, and cold execution threats spilling from his lips as casually as if he were sipping his morning coffee. He had spoken her father's name and her own with a dark, possessive tone, proving beyond the shadow of a doubt that he was in up to his ears in a world of crime and murder. Overcome with shock, she took a step backward, but her foot struck an antique vase sitting on a decorative stand. The vase crashed onto the concrete floor, shattering with a deafening sound that ripped through the quiet of the basement. Jungkook was wearing a black shirt with its top button undone, revealing the tattoos stretching across his toned chest and neck. In his other hand, he held a tactical handgun fitted with a silencer. His sharp features radiated a sadistic, ruthless fury that made the ground feel as though it were shaken beneath her feet. He swept his dark pitch black eyes over her pale, sweet, glistening face, then pressed his massive board frame entirely against hers, trapping her completely between his weight and her kneeling stone, making her aware of every contour of his lean, muscular body beneath their coats. Instead, he drew even closer until his lips brushed the edge of her ear, whispering with a possessive harshness that terrified her to her core. Which opened into the rear servants' balcony. With bleeding fingers and an energy driven by sheer hatred and defiance, she managed to squeeze through the narrow wooden passage, dropping into a hard layer of snow below. Her plan was insane. Reach the estate's rear forest gate, sneak toward the main highway, and find anyone who could help, or head straight to her father's law firm in the capital. The biting cold gnawed at her slender limbs, and the winter silk robe she wore offered a little defense against the brutal frost. She crept stealthily between the towering tree trunks, the dry leaves crunching softly beneath her thin slippers, which offered no protection against the biting cold of the snow and the sharp scraps of the harsh branches. What Selena didn't realize, however, was the mansion's forest was far more than just trees and foliage. It was a battleground and unshielded perimeter, just as she had envisioned it as her escape route. Jungkook's enemies viewed dense woods as the easiest point of entry into his territory, barely 200 meters beyond the palace walls. Through the rising mist, she caught the glint of headlight from unmarked, blacked out SUVs designed for sale. Those vehicles did not belong to Jungkook. Jungkook didn't give him the chance to finish. With a brutal force, he snapped the man's neck, the sickening crack resounding clearly in Selena's ear before tossing the corpse aside like a worn-out rag. A terrifying, suffocating silence fell over the forest, broken only by Jungkook's deep, controlled breathing and the trembling gasp of Selena as she sat frozen in the snow, burying her face in her hands with tears scalding her cheeks. This was the very first time she had witnessed a raw, cold-blooded death unfold right before her eyes. Jungkook leaned down with unexpected gentleness, scooping her up into his broad, powerful arms with absolute ease, as she were a weightless feather. Her small frame was enveloped by the heat of his massive body, and overwhelmed by the sheer terror and shock, she unconsciously wrapped her arms around his neck, breathing in the scent of his cologne and tobacco laced with blood and gunpowder. He gazed down at her with cold, absolute possession as she lay in his embrace, whispering against her pale face. Her perspective of him had shifted entirely. No longer did she view him merely as a greedy or unjust cousin who had fraudulently seized her father's empire. She now realized that the world her father had left her behind in was a treacherous swamp filled with lurking hyenas, and that Jungkook was the sole steel barrier preventing those hyenas from tearing her apart. On the other side of the opulent office, Jungkook stood by the large glass window watching the pale down Greek. She looked at him, but he quickly averted his gaze and stepped toward her. Dropping into his knees before the sofa, he reached out and began taking off her slippers. Selena tensed up, trying to pull her legs away from his powerful grip, but her efforts were in vain. She couldn't budge an inch. Jungkook raised his cold dark eyes to meet hers. He returned a few moments later with firm, energetic steps, tossing a heavy black leather folder onto the small table in front of her. She read in utter shock. Her father had not been the ordinary peaceful businessman she had always imagined. He was a key figure protecting the major ties of the underworld. According to the document, the Jeon family consisted of 9 brothers: Hansuk, Jungkook's father, Jeon Robert, her own father, and 7 others who were her uncles. What Selena had never known was that her father was not a legitimate son of the family. He was the child of their grandfather, free and mistress. Yet before his passing, the grandfather had legally acknowledged him and left the vast majority of his inheritance to Robert. The only one among the brothers who had truly loved Robert since childhood, embraced him as a real brother, was Hansuk. For that very reason, their bond had always been unbreakable. Selena clasped the official guardianship dossier, but instead of signing it, her hands tightened around the heavy paper and toned it straight down the middle. Without a word, she tossed the shred document into a wastebasket beside the desk. Jungkook's eye widened in unprecedented shock and disbelief, his sharp features freezing as he struggled to process what he had just witnessed. His eyes ignited with obsession and a boundless possessive adoration. His steel-like hands immediately reached out to wrap around her slender waist with swift heat, holding her tightly against his body until not a sliver of space remained between them. He lifted her off the floor, burying her face into the soft crack of her neck and inhaling her scent with desperate hunger for lover who had finally reclaimed his soul after an eternity of waiting. He whispered in her ear, his voice was burning, masculine rumble overflowing with raw passion and soulman vow. So guys, hi, how's everyone doing? I'm just gonna let this little note here at the end of the video, just to see like who's gonna stay until this time, okay? This is Ron, aka Dark, as my Arab community knows me. I'm an Arab writer since 2017, 2018, but then I stopped in 2021, kind of 2020 because of the COVID. But here I am again, yeah. What I want to do in this channel is just try like sharing the English version of my original stories or like Jungkook's FFs I already share in my original channel. And then I'm gonna start making new official ones for the English channel too. Um, Anyways, I'm so like excited to meet you guys and like talk to you and see what do you think about like what I'm writing and all of that. Also, I'm so sorry if there is some mistakes about like what I'm writing and also how like I'm saying the words because English isn't my first language. I do apologize. And also, you can tell from my voice that I'm so sick, guys. I'm having cold. Yeah, like flu. I don't know what it's called, but yeah. So I hope you wish me to get well so soon. And yeah, that's it. If you stayed until this moment, like at the end of the video, let's write all of us dark, okay? Just say dark. So I can know that you stayed until the this moment of the video. That's it, guys. Bye bye. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. And just leave a comment. I read, okay? I read comments and I reply to comments. That's it. Bye bye, guys. Take care of yourself.